Swedish government has managed to bring down the number of migrants granted asylum to its lowest level in 40 years.
Take the money and leave, please. The Swedish government is offering to pay immigrants $34,000 if they go back to their home country.
In a single year, up to 1 million refugees entered Europe. However, one country accepted more refugees per capita than nearly any other nation in Europe. That country was Sweden. In 2015 alone, over 163,000 asylum seekers arrived in a nation of just 10 million people. That would be like the United States taking in over 5 million refugees in just 1 year. While many European countries set entry limits, Sweden kept its immigration policy open. Swedish politicians described this approach as a moral obligation. Many Swedish families offered housing to refugees in their own homes. Sweden was widely regarded as a model for humanitarian compassion. In recent years, however, Sweden has implemented one of the most significant reversals in immigration policy in modern European history. In 2024, Sweden granted asylum to only 6,250 individuals. That's a 93% drop from the highest number of arrivals. Asylum applications have fallen to their lowest level in nearly 30 years. For the first time in over 50 years, more individuals are leaving Sweden than entering. This raises the question, what factors contributed to this dramatic shift? How did one of Europe's most open countries become among the strictest in its immigration policies? Did Sweden resolve its immigration challenges, or did it create new issues in the process? In this episode of The Bigger Map, we examine Sweden's significant transformation.
For decades, Sweden built its identity around humanitarian immigration. After World War II, it sheltered refugees from across Europe. During the Cold War, it welcomed dissidents fleeing communist regimes. In the 1990s, it took in families escaping the wars in Yugoslavia. Then came Iraq. Then Somalia. Sweden didn't just let refugees in. It gave permanent residency, generous welfare, family reunification, integration programs funded by the state.
Refugees weren't seen as temporary guests. They were seen as future citizens. So when the war in Syria triggered the largest refugee crisis since World War II, Sweden responded in a way that few other countries did. In 2015, more than 163,000 asylum seekers arrived. This was the highest per-person intake in the European Union. Entire towns transformed almost overnight. Sports halls became shelters. Hotels were converted into housing. Temporary camps filled parks. Sweden showed that large-scale compassion was possible. But what came next would change everything.
The problem wasn't the refugees themselves. The main challenge was how quickly people arrived. Sweden suddenly had hundreds of thousands of people needing housing, jobs, language training, schools, and social services. The existing system was not designed to accommodate such numbers. Local governments were overwhelmed. Small towns with no experience of immigration suddenly had to help thousands of newcomers. Housing shortages exploded. Rents surged. Waiting lists grew. Ethnic enclaves developed in suburbs surrounding Stockholm, Malmö, and Gothenburg, neighborhoods where Swedish was rarely spoken. Unemployment among refugees remained extremely high.
Many struggled to learn the language. Others faced discrimination. Some communities became heavily dependent on welfare. Social tensions increased, and then violence began to rise. By the late 2010s, Sweden was experiencing something it had never seen before. Gang violence increased significantly in neighborhoods with high immigrant populations. Shootings occurred in broad daylight. Hand grenades were used in residential areas, and bombings targeting rival groups. In 2022 alone, Sweden recorded over 60 fatal shootings. For a country of 10 million people, that's one of the highest gun homicide rates in Europe, higher than the United Kingdom, higher than most Western nations. Only Albania ranked worse.
Stockholm, once known as one of Europe's safest capitals, now had a gun murder rate many times higher than London. The violence was largely driven by organized criminal networks, many involving second-generation immigrants fighting over drug territory. Police struggled to control it. Witnesses were afraid to testify. Some areas became so dangerous that emergency services hesitated to enter with armed backup. This development stood in stark contrast to Sweden's long-standing reputation for peace and safety. Public patience diminished. In 2022, Swedish voters delivered a historic shift. The Sweden Democrats, a nationalist anti-immigration party previously considered fringe, received over 20% of the vote, becoming the second-largest party in parliament. A party with minimal political presence a decade earlier now held significant influence. Conservative leader Ulf Kristersson became prime minister only with their support. In exchange, the Sweden Democrats gained substantial control over immigration policy. Their message was direct. The era of open borders was over. The goal was a paradigm shift. Cut asylum immigration to the absolute minimum allowed under EU law. And that's exactly what happened.
First, permanent residency was scrapped. Refugees now receive temporary permits only. There is no longer an automatic pathway to long-term residency. Next, refugee quotas were slashed. Sweden cut UN resettlement spots by more than 80%. Asylum approvals plummeted. 7 out of 10 applicants were rejected. Humanitarian visas were nearly eliminated. Family reunification was tightened. Higher income requirements, higher age limits, stricter housing rules.
The government also began considering revocation of citizenship in cases of fraud or serious criminal activity. Then came fast-track deportations. Authorities were given more power to remove people quickly. Asylum seekers were forced into state housing or risk losing financial support. And perhaps most controversially, public sector employees, including teachers and doctors, may soon be legally required to report undocumented migrants. Sweden was not only tightening its policies, it was changing its relationship with immigration.
Then came the most shocking policy of all. Sweden began offering immigrants up to $34,000 to voluntarily return to their home countries. Life-changing money for many immigrants. The government openly stated its goal: make Sweden less attractive for asylum migration, encourage voluntary departures. And by the numbers, it worked.
By 2024, asylum permits fell to just 6,250. Applications dropped below 10,000, the lowest levels since the 1990s. While asylum claims across Europe surged back toward crisis levels, Sweden's kept falling. And for the first time in over 50 years, Sweden experienced negative net migration. More people left Sweden than arrived. Communities that had grown rapidly were now shrinking. The government declared the policy shift a success.
Supporters say Sweden finally addressed problems that were ignored for too long. Crime is being targeted. Segregation is being confronted. Integration measures are being more strictly enforced. Critics say Sweden is abandoning its humanitarian values. Human rights groups warn that the new policies violate international norms. Teachers and doctors fear the reporting laws will destroy trust. Some industries now face labor shortages, and immigrant communities report feeling increasingly targeted. Sweden's population growth is slowing down. The immigration that once supported Sweden's economy is now declining. Sweden's transformation didn't happen in isolation. Across Europe, countries are watching closely. Denmark pioneered similar crackdowns. The Netherlands is tightening its laws. Germany is reinforcing its borders. But Sweden stands out because of how far it shifted, from Europe's most open system to one of its most restrictive. It became both a cautionary example and a potential model, a case study in what happens when integration moves faster than institutions can handle.
So, did Sweden solve its immigration crisis? By the numbers, yes. Arrivals collapsed. Net migration reversed. The surge stopped. But the Sweden of today is not the Sweden of a decade ago. A country once known for open doors now actively discourages asylum seekers. Supporters call it realism. Critics call it betrayal. The reality likely exists between these two perspectives. Sweden proved compassion can work on a massive scale, but also that without infrastructure, it carries heavy consequences.
The Swedish case illustrates how rapidly public opinion can change and how dramatically policy can change. Because when migration reshapes society fast enough, politics follows, and the pendulum doesn't stop in the middle. They can become highly polarized. Sweden adopted a more open immigration policy than any other European nation. Now it is implementing some of the strictest immigration controls. The international community is observing whether this significant policy shift will deliver increased safety and stability, or simply replaces one set of challenges with another.